already overwhelmed and getting a little speechless, and I'm supposed to give a speech. I just have to, first of all, thank Jessica and all the organizers for inviting me. I'm deeply honored and moved to be here. And then let's just get going. I thought for a moment about doing it telepathically because of my speechlessness. But it's not working, is it? Okay, so let's try differently. Imagine yourselves on a retreat, not just any retreat, but 10 days of no talking, no reading, no writing, no music, no television, no internet, no cell phone, nothing. Just you and your mind. You and your mind meditating for 8-10 hours a day for these 10 days. And imagine that you subjected yourself to the situation voluntarily. Well, I did. And I wanted to share a few observations and reflections about this experience. But before, I have to provide a little bit of background and walk you very briefly through the journey that led me to embark on this unusual adventure. Unusual especially for someone who, by profession and training, is a skeptical, rigorous neuroscientist, which I happen to be. Well, at least I believe myself to be. So over the past 15 years, I've been investigating brain function associated with cognitive processing, things like memory, attention, visual spatial abilities. Brain function associated with experience and expression of the various emotions, sadness, fear, joy, anxiety, in people with mental health problems, particularly schizophrenia. Why schizophrenia? Well, it's just one of the most intriguing, the most complex, and still widely misunderstood disorders. And it is often associated with presence of hallucinations, delusions, mystical experiences, and other altered states of mind. And I've been always fascinated by these altered states of mind. And I always wanted to find out more about the underlying neurochemistry, neurophysiology of such states. So my neuroscience journey has led me from early studies in rats to subsequent studies in humans, from early injections of various psychoactive substances directly into the brain of rats to neuroimaging of brain structure and function of people who were experiencing hallucinations, thought disorder, paranoia. It's been an amazing journey, and I enjoyed every single moment of it. But this journey has been going on in parallel with another voyage. During this time, I've been also an ardent student and practitioner of Eastern philosophies. But I have to tell you that combining the two, reconciling the two, has not been easy. In fact, for years, I would not mention a word about my practices to the fellow neuroscientist. And vice versa, really, I was rather quiet about my scientific background when interacting with fellow practitioners. So this here, right now, it's a little bit like coming out of the closet. And yeah, I feel a little vulnerable. But the thing is that my journey through the landscape of mindfulness, as I decided to call it for the purpose of this talk, has already started in an unlikely situation. It started in my childhood. I would watch my dad standing on his head, sitting in a lotus position for hours, or performing all kinds of contortions. This was happening in the living room of our little apartment in the communist Poland. So you see, I grew up at a time and place where practicing yoga or meditation was considered pretty bizarre, to say the least. Then again, I grew up in the household where being mildly eccentric and going against the mainstream was encouraged. So I continued. I studied, I read and contemplated Tao Te Ching, Indian Vedas and Upanishads, various ancient and contemporary Buddhist texts. But really, it wasn't until my 30s, my early 30s, when I added to this purely theoretical and intellectual study and understanding of these philosophies a committed systematic practice. I forgot about my slides. These are just images for your enjoyment. I started with Ashtanga yoga, but then explored a whole range of different traditions, practices, schools of thoughts, philosophies. I took courses, went on retreat, teacher trainings. It was all, well, most of it was really engaging and enriching. But there were always these moments of doubt and questioning. What am I doing here? I'm a neuroscientist. The rational brain demanded lucid scientific explanations, and I wasn't really getting any. So at some point, to decrease the cognitive dissonance that was building, I thought, well, it's simple. I'm going to follow empirical evidence. If only subjective, well, it's good enough for me. If something works for me, if something speaks to me, if something moves me and transforms me, I should embrace it. So I did. And I continue experimentation, and one of the recent experiments has been this 10-day retreat I asked you to imagine. 10 days of silence. It's called Vipassana retreat. Vipassana is a mindfulness meditation where there is lots of focus and attention being given to being in a moment, aware of your bodily sensations, of the thoughts, emotions. It is rooted in the Theravada Buddhism, but you don't have to be a Buddhist to practice it. It's open to everybody. And I do not want to disclose all the details. I would not want to spoil it for those of you who decide to go on such a retreat. But I have to tell you that for me personally, it was amazing. It was fascinating from the perspective of someone who is looking for mind expansion, or at least an interesting alteration. And from the standpoint of a neuroscientist, interested in cognitive function and emotion processing under different, unusual sometimes circumstances. And here the circumstances were definitely atypical, with no talking, no reading, no writing, no internet, mostly sitting still in silence. So what we were experiencing was mild, or in some cases even moderate, sensory deprivation. Yet paradoxically, the sensory perception was greatly enhanced. So to give you just a few examples, the food tasted amazingly. Don't get me wrong, the food was very good, but I don't think I would appreciate it to the same extent right now. The birds singing in the nearby forest, divine. Taking a shower was a major sensual extravaganza. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that my body and my mind was capable of such subtlety, of such sensitivity, of such concentration. But since, it's coming out, I have to be open and honest and reveal everything, or almost everything. Some unusual experiences also started appearing. So in my case, by day 3, 4, I started having at night these intense piercing shivers all over my body. And They were not entirely unpleasant, but prevented me from sleeping. And the wake-up call was at 4 a.m. to start meditating at 4:30. Now, being a skeptical neuroscientist, I didn't worry too much about these endogenous exorcisms, as I called them, just to humor myself. You know, I didn't have anybody else to talk, so I did lots of talking myself. But I wondered, and I knew it was a side effect of sitting still for hours. But I wondered, what about people who are less scientifically inclined? If they are experiencing also some alterations to their sensory perceptions, how do they feel? What's going on with them? And indeed, on day 10, when we broke the silence and we could finally meet in a more conventional way, I found out that there were a few other people who heard some sounds, saw some lights. A few became slightly paranoid. A few were elated, feeling like they were approaching enlightenment. You know, it all depended on your beliefs and expectations. One thing was sure. Many people were experiencing this altered state of mind. And this is something that I'm really interested in as a neuroscientist. So after coming back home, all I could think of was, how can I go back and perform a study where I could evaluate people before, during, and after? Look at their mental state, cognitive functions, emotions, brain functions. Well, I haven't done it yet, but it's in my head, and maybe it will happen one day. But another question was raised in my mind and also asked by people when I came back. Would I recommend it to everyone? And I have to tell you, no, I would not recommend it to everyone. These were pretty severe circumstances which could potentially exacerbate serious mental health problems. Having said that, I would definitely recommend mindfulness meditation, any other mindfulness-based technique, but you don't have to jump into 10 days of silent retreat. I mean, it's interesting, but it's not necessary. One can start with 15, 20 minutes. And I'm saying that not only because of my personal experiences and I want to somehow convert you to this path, but principally because more and more evidence is accumulating, pointing that many of these techniques have interesting benefits. So what are some of these benefits? Reduction in stress, amelioration of depression and anxiety. People seem to sleep better. They cope better with pain. There's a boost to immune system. Cognitive function improves. And there's some interesting reorganization of brain structure and function. So of course, again, being a neuroscientist, I have to give you at least one example of such reorganization. And here, I told you that at some point, I decided to follow things that moved me. And one of those things has been the loving kindness meditation. It's sometimes called metta meditation. It's a very simple practice that basically consists of directing well wishes towards others, towards people you love and care about deeply, as well as those you dislike, maybe even hate, if that's the case. And I remember practicing this and wondering, years ago when I started, and wondering how is it that this pretty simple and naive exercise renders me more joyful, more giving, more generous, more compassionate. What was going on with my brain? And there's been some studies now. I didn't have a chance to investigate it myself, but a few recent studies show that indeed this specific type of meditation, the loving kindness meditation, can produce changes in the structure and function of the limbic system. Limbic system is part of the brain circuitry heavily implicated in processing of various emotions, including compassion and empathy. And in people who were practicing it, it became more sensitive. It became more responsive to seeing or even hearing or knowing about other people in distress. People who were practicing it were more likely to help others, to be there for others, to be generous and open. And so I'm not going to go into any details, what brain structure exactly and what was going on, because I think what's most exciting about these findings is that they suggest that compassion, empathy, generosity can be learned, or at least enhanced in adults, in brains that we considered not as plastic as children's brains, for example. And so, of course, much more research is still needed. We have to find out, is it going to work for everybody? For example, would it work? Would it be beneficial for undergraduate students? I don't see why not. Would it be beneficial for people with mental health problems, where there are already studies showing that, in fact, yes, these techniques enhance mental health? Would it be beneficial in criminal psychopaths? I don't know. But this is just one way that mindfulness and neuroscience started crossing paths in my brain in the recent years. And so, of course, as a neuroscientist, I'm extremely excited. And I feel certain redemption that, all these studies are coming out and I've been practicing. Okay, it all made sense. But really, when it comes down to it, for me, it has been always more about understanding better myself, understanding the universe and my role in it. And so the benefits I consider particularly precious involve things like experiencing more intimately and comprehending better the idea and reality of impermanence. When you sit still and you observe your thoughts and you see your emotions flying by and changing, at some moment you realize, and it's not an intellectual process, it's really experiential. You see how there's nothing stable, there's nothing solid, and it really doesn't make sense to hold on to things, to be afraid of things. It becomes silly to be angry with things. You just let go and relax, and you develop greater tolerance for uncertainty. Another very precious gift for me are those rare moments when I can experience what some people call emptiness, others shunyata. I call it rehearsing death. I know, doesn't sound very appealing, but these are actually moments of amazing freedom, profound peacefulness, a sense of spacelessness and timelessness, a sense of dissolving and dispersing. So it's non-existence, yet being it all. And again, one cannot explain it in words. You have to experience it. And one thing for sure, it eliminates the fear of death. But finally, most importantly, on a most fundamental level, my travel, my journey through this landscape of mindfulness and absorption of these different techniques has been really important in providing basic sanity. It has enhanced my enthusiasm, my joy of life. It has made me more compassionate, more generous, more open. And I'm extremely grateful for that. Not to mention a pretty good flexibility. Thank you.